Wow, it's new, so it's beautiful. Looks like a nice, easy-to-live-in house. Just married, my husband Justin and I had put a lot of care into building our beloved home. It was Justin's father, Brian, and mother, Melissa, who placed a muddy old suitcase in our meticulously cleaned living room. Turns out, they were moving in with us from today. They had decided to live together with us, without prior discussion. I was astounded and confronted Justin. "What do you mean by this, without consulting me?" "Well, don't worry, my mom's here for the housework, right? We'll get used to it quickly, and it's good to support each other as a family." "No problem." Justin seemed completely oblivious to my rejection, readily agreeing with Brian and Melissa. Raised in an old but grand house by parents-in-law Brian and Melissa, Justin had always seen the role of a wife as nothing more than a convenient housekeeper. Of course, Brian and Melissa felt the same way. Fed up with the weekly dinners at the in-laws' house. "She's a disobedient woman," Brian went as far as to say. Furthermore, with not enough rooms, Justin ordered me to make space. "You can sleep in the garden. It's lucky since you don't have to deal with my parents." Justin said this with a sleazy smile. I held back my tears and rushed into my room. When I returned, dragging a suitcase just as heavy as Brian and Melissa's, Justin and his parents were shocked. Then, I announced loudly, "I'm going back to my parents' home. Enjoy your stay." I am Stephanie. Currently, I work in the product development department of a health food company. At 32, my husband Justin, also my age, works in the sales department of the same company. Justin is very considerate and a valuable team player, always excelling, making him my pride. We first met at an interdepartmental mixer. Dressed up, I caught someone's attention with the ring on my pinky finger, sparking a conversation about our mutual interest in collecting antique jewelry. Rings, I thought, were all about those gem-studded ones you find at your parents' home. Justin said, as I introduced him to vintage ring and necklace designs. This led to us going out for meals after work or on weekends, and soon, we began dating. Before 6 months passed, he proposed, and we received blessings from our colleagues and bosses. We had discussions, even before getting married, about building a house. Naturally, our goal was to pool our money, take out a loan, and create a home filled with personal touches, even if it was small. I'd love a spacious living room or a garden. It'd be great for future kids or pets. We might not have a huge budget, but I'll need to save more, cut back, and work harder than ever. There was a lot to consider about the house. We had settled on a general location, but needed to decide on the land based on accessibility, shopping, and potential schools for future children, as well as the exterior design and non-negotiables for each of us. After numerous meetings with the design office, we were carefully crafting our dream home. Given that the real estate agent introduced us to this land, it's close to my parents' home, but I think my parents are quite understanding and won't make things difficult for you, Stephanie. Yeah, they were kind during our family meeting, so it should be fine. Melissa is a great cook, which might be a bit of pressure. Our parents-in-law apparently managed several plots of land in the area. Now, they've sold most of them to a real estate agent, so they don't own much besides their home. However, thanks to that connection, we were lucky enough to be given priority in being introduced to a plot of land. Since it was found through a referral, the location was going to be near the in-laws' house. Brian, Melissa, and I didn't have many opportunities to meet. That made our relationship somewhat tense. However, Brian and Melissa always seemed cheerful and kind, and they appeared genuinely happy whenever I visited. Brian is responsible, and Melissa is a housewife who values family. They both said they were looking forward to the house plans, and I thought they were really great parents-in-law. Once the house design was finalized and it was time to start construction, we decided to go greet Brian and Melissa. Although we wouldn't be next door, being neighbors, we wanted to make a good impression early on. Upon our visit, we were greeted by a house that was significantly larger than the surrounding ones. I am always overwhelmed by the size of the in-laws' house whenever I visit. Brian and Melissa welcomed us with smiles. "Building a house is a big step, but I thought, that's my son for you. Our house is old, so the idea of a new, clean house is something to envy. Building a house sounds exciting. Stephanie, we're looking forward to it too." Both Brian and Melissa were supportive. From Justin: "There's still some time until the house is finished, but how about we spend more time with Dad and Mom from now on?" I replied, "Of course, let's do that." Replied. Justin gets along well with Brian and Melissa, and they're so close that they even know his business trip schedules and holidays. Because of that, we started getting invited by Brian and Melissa on days when our holidays matched. The occasions weren't anything significant, just trips to the suburban shopping mall or meals at home, increasing our opportunities to meet. But I think there's a limit to everything. For instance, Melissa might call on a Friday night like this: "Stephanie, thank you for last time. So, next time I was thinking of going to look for a bag as a gift for a friend, and it would be really helpful if you could drive. Also, I'm inviting you to lunch on Sunday. I plan to get some fresh fish. Bring Justin along to our place. And, could you bring a dish? Please no seafood, soup, or salad, as I'm better at those. And about the clothes." Not only did she talk about this, but she also included weekend plans, and even specified many details. I talked to my friends about how hard it is to deal with parents-in-law, but all I got back were stories about Brian and Melissa's. Visiting the in-laws' house had become a chore. Despite being busy with work, the constant weekend calls were too much. So, I finally mustered the courage to decline Melissa's invitations. "I'm truly sorry for intruding so often. Plus, I really want some downtime on weekends. It's a bit embarrassing, but when you're working, house chores just pile up." Despite my attempt to divert the conversation, Melissa was unfazed. "Don't be silly, we're family now." And just like that, I couldn't escape the upcoming weekend visit. Reluctantly, I went to the in-laws' house with a heavy heart. Worst of all, Justin was aware of my attempt to decline. Therefore, we talked about it all the time in the car on the way. Mom was upset. "Dad might say something." He reproached me all the way there. Once at the in-laws' house, the topic was immediately brought up again. I felt so small. That's when Brian pointed at Melissa and suggested, "Why doesn't Melissa help out with the chores?" I was shocked. That would be too much to ask of Melissa. Not at all. Just finish your chores during the week, and you can help clean Stephanie's apartment. You're a housewife with free time, give Stephanie a task. I was surprised by Brian's suggestion, but the way he spoke shocked me even more. To Melissa, who has entered the household as a housewife, Brian's words seemed to be packed with misunderstandings and intense presumptions. It felt as if he was a boss giving orders, and I was left speechless. What's terrifying is Melissa's smile in response. She accepts Brian's instructions as if they were only natural. I managed to fend off that suggestion. Because I kept refusing. "You're so uncooperative," Brian muttered. I could tell he was irritated, and my heart skipped several beats. Brian got in a bad mood, and Melissa hurried to appease him. The air felt awkward and suffocating. I should stop visiting the in-laws' house. So I quietly decided. The following week, When Melissa called to invite me over, I tried to decline, saying I had other plans. If we ended up living near the in-laws' house once our new place was finished, wouldn't we end up seeing each other almost every day, not just on weekends? Such a terrifying thought stirred within me. Oh, why haven't you been able to do the housework? Maybe I should have come over to help, like Brian said. To Melissa, I replied, I made plans to go out to eat with friends who attended our wedding. So, I can't come today, but maybe next time when we're both free. I managed to end the call after persuading her. The promise with my friend was a lie, but thinking it was dangerous to stay home, I quickly got ready and left. Since that day, I've found reasons to avoid going to the in-laws' house. Despite this, our house was completed without issue. Justin and I were thrilled with our beautiful new home, and we lived there, cleaning every nook and cranny. However, less than half a month after moving, Melissa suddenly called me out of the blue. It didn't seem to be for a meal or shopping. I know you don't feel like coming over on weekends, but there's something I have to tell you. Okay, I'll come over right away. With that, I couldn't talk back. Rushing over, Melissa let me into the house and, for some reason, started explaining the household chores at the in-laws' house. Basically, cleaning the entrance and the garden every day. Normally just dry wiping, but on weekends, mop the hallways too. Then there's shopping and managing the household budget. Oh, and it's okay to switch to whatever method you find easier. Melissa was smiling kindly, but I couldn't understand why she was explaining this to me. It was as if she was talking about me living there and sharing household chores with her. Why are you telling me this? I asked, puzzled about being taught how to use cleaning tools and the kitchen. Melissa frowned as if annoyed. Stephanie, since you married Justin, you'll follow our way. Don't you understand that? Don't you want to devote yourself to us as Justin's wife? Then, Melissa asked, how long do you plan to keep working? Melissa asked. I was speechless, not having any intention to quit. It seemed in Melissa's mind, I was eventually supposed to retire and become a housewife, helping out with the chores at the in-laws' house. Dumbfounded by being dragged into such an unexpected conversation. If that's the case, I'm leaving, I firmly said. I understand the importance of devoting myself to family as a wife, and I'm willing to help out as much as possible. But I'd like to prioritize our time as a couple first. I still have work in my own household chores, so I can't help out here. After refusing, I left the in-laws' house. I complained to Justin as soon as I got back, but he sided with Brian and Melissa, not listening to me. I didn't get married to do chores at the in-laws' house. Justin looked up, annoyed. You're always so selfish. There's no way Dad and Mom are wrong. Can't you get along with them? I was dumbstruck and could only stare back at Justin. I was shocked not only by the difference in thinking between Brian, Melissa, and me, but also by Justin's refusal to listen to my side. He usually doesn't act like this, but his attitude changes completely when it comes to Brian and Melissa. Justin does whatever Brian and Melissa say, especially if it's from Brian. Even the decision to build the house was based on Brian's suggestion to maintain a good relationship with the real estate agent. The thought of divorce crossed my mind. But with Justin frequently away on business trips, I spend a lot of time alone at home. And there's also the feeling of having just built the house. I decided to wait and see if there were any benefits to continuing my marriage with Brian and Melissa at a distance. However, I made it clear to Justin that I did not want to be involved with Brian and Melissa. I think the relationship with Brian and Melissa is quite strange. To be honest, I don't want to have anything to do with them in the future. I hate going to the in-laws' house for household chores, and I have no intention of living with them. Please don't forget that. I appealed seriously. Though I thought he might get angry, Justin backed down and understood. From now on, I'll mediate between my parents and you, Stephanie. He accepted. About a month later, on a certain weekend, I was making lunch at home. Then, Justin, who had been out since the morning, came home. Hearing multiple voices, I was suspicious, but then Brian and Melissa, carrying big luggage, came into the living room for some reason. Wow, it's so nice and clean because it's a new house. Looks like a good, easy-to-use home. I was surprised by Brian, who laughed loudly. Justin seemed proud as he showed the two around the living room, carrying several heavy suitcases. When I pressed him for answers, Justin began to say something unbelievable. Apparently, starting today, Brian and Melissa were moving in to live with us in this house. What? Why? How can you decide this without consulting me? I've been thinking about it, and since you don't want to talk to the parents, I've been mediating. Don't worry about household chores, Mom is here, right? We'll get used to it quickly and support each other. No problem. What kind of thought process is this? I felt like I was about to be engulfed in despair. Living with Brian and Melissa, who have a different way of thinking, will undoubtedly be incredibly difficult. Anyway, I thought we had to avoid living together, but it seems the house and land were already sold. All preparations for living together were done without telling me. Now, the two of them only have their immediate luggage, as they've stored their larger furniture elsewhere. Just when I had told Justin I wanted to avoid any involvement with Brian and Melissa as much as possible, I confronted him with disbelief, feeling betrayed. Why would you decide this without telling me? Why proceed unilaterally without consulting me? Don't you care about my feelings? This affects our future life. We should have discussed this as a family. However, Justin looked at me as if I were a nuisance. But if Dad and Mom say they want to live with us, what can we do? Just accept it as a trial period. I did all the house selling and moving preparations because you said you didn't want to be involved. A trial period when the house is already sold? Doing this behind my back is just treachery. Always complaining even though we're married. You're my wife. Try to endure a little. This is my house, after all. I was stunned into silence by Justin's furious tirade, his bizarre logic making me shrink back. To Justin, my convenience or opinions must seem almost non-existent. Ignoring me, he began to lead Brian and Melissa upstairs. In our small house, there are only 3 private rooms. Justin's study, my room, and our bedroom, which was planned to become the nursery for when we had children. Then Justin turned to me and declared, "Clear out your stuff from the room." Though I wasn't surprised, expecting something of the sort, the blatant discomfort was evident. Mom will use Stephanie's room instead. Since the bedroom will go to Dad, maybe Stephanie can sleep in the garden? You don't want to deal with my parents, right? If Brian and Melissa were each to use a room, it was obvious there wouldn't be enough space. Justin's malicious smirk as he suggested I sleep in the garden was clearly a well-thought-out plan to hurt me. Despite understanding that I should stand tall as I don't recall doing anything to be resented for, the sadness of being rejected by Justin, whom I thought loved me, is suffocating. Behind him, Brian was looking at me and laughing with a sleazy smile. Justin is under the thumb of Brian and Melissa. It was conceivable that they were inciting Justin to harass me. Yet, instead of defending me, Justin chose to side with Brian and Melissa. This realization filled me with despair, and I found myself silently staring at Justin. He barged into my room, announcing, Make it quick!" announcing. Without hesitation, I entered my room and took out the heavy suitcase I had packed in advance. Justin was surprised by my unexpected speed. I told the three of them, "I'm going back to my parents' home. Enjoy your time without me." Indeed, I had prepared my belongings so I could return to my parents' home at any moment. The furniture in my room was all disposable, in case it got thrown out without my consent. Apparently, Justin, Brian, and Melissa hadn't expected me to leave the house and began to panic, trying to stop me. Melissa accused me. "Are you trying to dump all the housework on me?" But that seemed more like her own plan. Living with Brian and spending decades in a space where Justin was present before our marriage, it seemed to me Melissa had no love for the family. However, Melissa was trying to escape by setting up a new wife as a sacrifice, rather than fighting or resisting. Unwilling to play into such schemes, I ignored everything and returned to my parents' home. My parents were surprised, but upon hearing the situation, they showed understanding and expressed their anger towards Justin and the others. Feeling relieved to have strong allies, I received a message from Justin. It seems he, along with Brian and Melissa, was coming to my parents' home to fetch me. "Come back. I'll forgive you." Justin began to say something incomprehensible. Anticipating a discussion at my parents' home, I hung up the phone and contacted someone else. With my parents present, 6 of us gathered around the table. Especially my dad, upon hearing what kind of harassment I had faced, glared at Justin, Brian, and Melissa with fury. Yet, they showed no signs of remorse. Brian even took the lead, claiming, "Stephanie is an unreasonable wife who doesn't devote herself to marriage." My dad looked at them with disbelief. "Stephanie should behave more sensibly as a wife. It's only natural to quit her job to dedicate herself to the family. She's still working, which is selfish. She should be grateful that we're allowing that. Going back to her parents' home, what does she intend? The way you complain, you'd never make it as Justin's wife. Why don't you try harder and be more cooperative with the family?" Brian's criticism was at the forefront, with Melissa adding her grievances. Justin agreed. "Dad's right." I tried to express my feelings while enduring their words, but it only made things worse. The more I spoke, the more they retorted. Suddenly, my dad spoke up. "I can't believe you're forcing cohabitation. She's still our daughter, even if married. If you claim she's inadequate, then please, get a divorce." Encouraged by my dad, I filed for divorce. I had already signed. All that was needed was Justin's signature, but upon seeing this, Brian and Justin started to get angry, their eyes narrowing. "Hey, don't be foolish. You think this will solve everything? Don't expect a divorce to just happen. Resorting to drastic measures, you coward." As Brian raised his voice, Justin followed with a look of discomfort towards me. "We haven't even had a proper discussion. Can't you just calm down and think about this? This is why I hate women who can't engage in logical discussions." Justin and his accusations continued, as if to break the family apart, acting all high and mighty. They claim they want to discuss, but it doesn't seem like they're in any state to have a conversation. I had long given up on talking and was only focused on getting the divorce papers signed. And it wasn't just Justin and Brian's terrible attitude that was the reason for the divorce. I have something I want to ask Melissa as well about this video. Saying that, I took out my mobile phone and played a certain video. Melissa's complexion changed as she peered into the screen. It was obvious she knew what was on it. It showed Melissa opening a drawer in my room. Since I had started refusing to do chores at my in-laws' house and rejecting their company, I noticed things gradually disappearing from my room. Stored in the drawer was a large box for antique jewelry, which had been a conversation starter between Justin and me. While the items were not all expensive, some were kept in a locked box. Stolen were luxurious-looking precious metals, antique rings, and a few other accessories, along with the contents of the locked box. All were part of an important collection, but also terrifyingly indicative that someone had been entering my room. I pondered if Justin was the culprit, but it seemed unlikely he'd target antiques that wouldn't sell for much. The price range is tricky, and the freedom Justin allows me in collecting items without complaints is because he knows I only buy cheap things. However, the disappearance of jewelry with gems suggests the motive was definitely for cash. Could it be that someone was let into the house while I was away? Frightened, I decided to gather evidence first and quickly bought a camera. After installing it in the shadow of the furniture, it wasn't long before the culprit was caught on video. The person who appeared in my room during the hours when no one was supposed to be home was Melissa. She must have had access through a key Justin lent her or a duplicate she had made. Using that key, Melissa targeted the times when no one was home to steal precious metals from the jewelry box, little by little. When confronted with this conclusive evidence from the video, Melissa turned pale. "I've already cashed them in, so I can't return them," and blurted out. When I said, "I will be seeking damages equivalent to the value," Melissa's irritating voice echoed, "That's a lie! No way!" Though I mostly collected inexpensive items, some of my jewelry was indeed luxurious. Among the items Melissa stole were those high-end accessories. Probably, the ones I kept locked up and treasured caught her eye. The cash value must have been significant. Because of this, the claim amount exceeded $5,000. Naturally, Melissa, being a housewife, couldn't possibly pay. Brian was trembling as he glared at me, not blaming Melissa for her theft. "Are you kidding me?" but barking, "You're going to sue over something this trivial? If you married Justin, then listen to him. Stop dressing up in garbage toys and be more." Brian was red in the face, yelling at the top of his lungs. It seemed he was seriously considering me as his property. The impression was that he was angry simply because I wasn't listening to him. "Don't you think you've joked enough?" Then he stood up and raised his hand towards me. I thought I was going to be hit, but Dad quickly stepped in to prevent it. However, at that moment, the doorbell rang. It was the visitor I had contacted. A lawyer familiar with divorce issues, who I had consulted about when considering divorce and more seriously when theft suspicions arose. When I visited the office known for its strong divorce litigation team, I was fortunate to be assigned to an older, competent lawyer. The atmosphere was filled with solemnity, and Justin, Brian, and Melissa seemed to shrink under the lawyer's presence, listening quietly. First, it was explained again that Melissa would be sued for damages. Then, evidence supporting the unreasonable claims from Justin, Brian, and Melissa was laid out. The diary I kept for emergencies, recordings, and videos from cameras set up before the lawyer's arrival were acknowledged as evidence. The lawyer spoke of claiming a settlement for the anguish as it could be sufficiently proven as psychological violence. When my firm intention to divorce and the discussions about property division came up, Justin stood up in a panic, starting to cling to me. "Drop this stupid idea of divorce. Aren't we in love? Do you seriously want to break up?" Following Justin's lead, "That's right, reconsider. You can still turn back now." Brian and Melissa also started, suggesting they were hoping for a retraction of the divorce. "We're not in love anymore. I really want to divorce Justin." For that, I'd consult a lawyer as many times as needed, and I don't care how long it takes or if it goes to court. When I said that coldly, Justin looked stunned, as if he had resigned himself to the idea. Seemingly disheartened, perhaps due to the authoritative title of a lawyer, Brian and Melissa also became completely silent and reluctantly agreed to the divorce. When the lawyer asked Melissa about her motive for stealing, a surprising fact was revealed. Melissa had been extravagant with money, splurging on shopping and such, resulting in not having enough for living expenses. Unable to tell Brian, she plotted to borrow money from Justin. Since Justin was on a business trip,
use the spare key to get in. There's money in the bedroom drawer, you can take that,
he instructed. Following his instructions, Melissa noticed a ring I had left in the bedroom. Isn't there more? She became greedy. After searching my room, she found jewelry in the closet. In addition to the jewelry, she found a fancy locked box and hurriedly took it to a locksmith. I lost the key. She lied to get it opened, took out the contents, and then put the box back in its original place. Every time she ran out of money, she confessed to coming to the house on her own and stealing a little at a time. Brian, hearing this, "You're the worst kind of thief," berated Melissa. Amidst the barrage of insults, "Take that talk home." Dad chased them out, and they left our house in a big commotion. I had also entrusted them with disposing of the furniture, so I never entered that house again. Justin, Brian, and Melissa began living in that house. However, the amount demanded at the time of the divorce could not be covered by savings alone, and it seems the house and land were seized. They managed to scrape together enough funds to move into a cramped apartment, leading a life of poverty. If only Melissa hadn't stolen. She's the worst thief. Brian couldn't stand constantly berating Melissa anymore. It seems she nearly took all the house's money and vanished suddenly. A panicked Justin contacted me. "Do you know anything?" Contacted me. Of course, I hadn't been in touch at all, so. "You should consult the police," I advised and hung up. The left behind Justin and Brian seemed to really have consulted the police. Melissa is being searched for, but so far, she hasn't been found. There's been no contact, but perhaps if she's found, she won't be returned to Brian and them. Justin and Brian, having no one else to take care of them, seemed to continue days filled with constant quarreling and bickering. Even at the company, rumors about Justin from other departments came flowing in. Perhaps due to the stress of a lower standard of living, his mistakes at work increased, and his sales department performance kept dropping. Justin, who got work by being nice to everyone, started making blunders such as increasing gaffes with clients, and in no time, was removed from his position and transferred to another department. It was a department known for its grueling workload, so the exhaustion only accumulated. Moreover, he made a major mistake by disclosing internal confidential information to a client and finally, completely lost his place. This became a significant issue within the company. Various departments were rushed for countermeasures, and Justin was held responsible and disciplined. Eventually, Justin felt too uncomfortable and resigned on his own, a friend from work told me. As for Brian, similarly burdened by exhaustion, his demeanor at work visibly became harsher. Company colleagues and subordinates began to suffer from mental distress one after another and received demotions. But, it seems my decision wounded Brian's pride, and in a fit of anger, he chose to resign on his own. Given the age factor, finding a new job was challenging, and later on, Justin reached out saying,
"I'm living off my savings, please help."
However, I had no choice but to refuse. After all, the settlement had already been paid, so I saw no reason to continue our association. I declined and promptly set Justin and Brian's numbers to block. finally free from that tie. I had been feeling bothered by the looks of divorce at the office, so I decided to switch jobs to a company that had been offering me a better position for a while. Moreover, I couldn't keep relying on my parents' home forever, so I used the settlement money to move into an apartment closer to my workplace. My parents were worried but respected my desire to become independent and saw me off. I kept in touch with my parents and spent valuable time with them at my parents' home during long vacations. In this new place, my life began to feel fulfilled. I was recovering mentally to the point where I could think positively about marrying again if the opportunity arose.